The 25th of February 2024, you're welcome back to the channel, and it's a coldish, dryish day in rural Ireland. As they say, there's no heat going to loss. Trump fraud. I want to explain to you what this decree for $355 million is all about. It was awarded in a New York court. It's a fine in a civil case for what they would describe as false accounting or fraud. It's not a criminal offence as such. It's the same in law as if a man in a town in Ireland had an account with a building firm, drew out all the materials, got his house built in 1 month, and then refused to pay the shop, the hardware shop, anything, or the builder or whatever. In other words, he had a free house. Okay, just to explain that again. Let's say he had a deal with a builder and he had a deal with a builder's providers, and he drew out all the materials, got all done within a month, and a month's credit is granted, and then he refuses to pay. These people at loss would go into court. There'd be a victim in that crime, in that particular thing. They would sue civilly. It might not be possible to prove it was a criminal offence of fraud, and the court would make the award that he has to pay. Now, the appeal procedure in America is something beyond my knowledge. American law is very, very strange. I once studied the American law on whiskey production, and I found it to be mad, completely and utterly mad, one section conflicting with another. In any event, their law is still based on the English common law, with the exception of the state of Louisiana, which has the Code de Civil, is the French law in certain civil cases only. In any event, in the accounting system, which is used both for company accounts, to inform people maybe buying a company, for tax purposes, and all of that, you have the value of the assets stated in the balance sheet, not in the profit and loss account. In the balance sheet, the balance sheet is a snapshot of the net worth of the company, and it includes retained profits that are not spent, that are brought forward and kept as savings and cash on hand. Now, we'd say you had a little corner shop. It's worth 100,000 euros or whatever, it doesn't matter, and at the end of the year it's still worth 100,000, and if you sold a certain amount of goods and your expenses equal to the amount of money you took in, you'd have zero profit, but you'd also have zero change in the value of your assets. So the whole thing would be a duck egg. You'd have nothing. You'd have made nothing in the year. You'd still retain the shop as your property. Fair enough. You understand that? Now, if on the other hand that shop was worth 100,000 at the beginning of the year, and a big shopping centre like Tesco's or Walmart in America, some of those, Super Value in Ireland, Marks and Sparks in England, Marks and Spencer, or some of that has announced plans to build a big store beside you. Well, the value of your property might double. It might double to 200,000 in a year. So at the start of the year, your property was worth 100,000, and at the end of the year, your property was worth 200,000. You still made no profit. Let's say you made nothing at all, zero. You made a duck egg selling and buying your product. You just your expenses equaled your intakings, so you made nothing. In that case, you would be 100,000 richer, 100,000 richer, because your premises had doubled in value by 100,000. And that would mean that your profits would show, your balance sheet would show your net worth had increased by 100,000. And if someone was lending to you, if you were temporarily stuck or you were ill and you had to shut the shop for a few days and you went for a loan, the bank might say, well, you have good premises there, we'll lend you some more money. You understand that? If after another year this big shopping centre decided to pull out and not go ahead, which has happened, I think, in some cases with some of these Tesco's and some of those, decided not to go ahead, the value of your premises would fall to 100,000 again. Do you understand that? And therefore you'd be back to the same. The only money you'd make would be on your sales, what you would sell in the shop. The profit on that. Okay, have you that? Now, it used to be that there was an obligation on the directors to make sure that the value of the assets were correctly stated, and the auditors were obliged to correctly state them. But this brought in the problem of how do you value anything? How do you know in a never-changing property situation where things were worth nearly nothing after the collapse? Well, let's say before the collapse, let's say 2006, property was valued in the millions and billions. Then you had the financial crash, then the backside fell out of it, and then it went down, and then it gradually built up again to today with rapid inflation and money printing. Property values are rising, are way up. So it's very hard to keep it right, and I would have imagined that there would have been some system devised by the accounting organisations to deal with this, but there isn't. There is a system in the accounting process for revaluating of fixed assets. It's quite complex. We don't need to go into it here, but it can be done. And you see, the other point is that one Irish pound lost at the beginning of the state in 2023 and found today would only buy 1/33. In other words, if you lost 33 pounds in 2020, in 19, when the Irish state was established, I said 2000, in 1923, see it there, in 1923, when the Irish state was set up, and you found that 33 pounds today, it would only buy £1 worth of goods. And there's a bridge built on a byroad over a 15-foot river, not far from here, which was built in British times in 1913 for £20 sterling. £20. That bridge today would not be built less than 28 or 9,000 pounds sterling. Now, the thing about it is that you get the idea. Now, one of the things I began to notice when I began to look at these wind farm accounts, they're all insolvent, of course. Greencoat Renewable share price fell to 86 cents during the week, and it's now up to 87. It looks like it'll never rise again. I can't understand why anyone would invest there. But in any event, that's the Irish section of it. In any event, I found that the value of the wind farms are way overstated, because every time you get a valuation or a sale of a company, you find that the value of the wind farms doesn't appreciate in accordance with what it should be. So what has happened is a norm has set in where accountants and auditors and directors get away with jacking up the price of their assets in order to attract loans and to get loans and for various other reasons. And this often happens with licensed premises such as pubs. We've seen court cases over it where a pub is put up for sale, there's 3 years accounts supplied, all audited and all, or whatever, and a man looks at it and he says, that's a good enough turnover, I'll buy that pub. And he buys it to discover that it's not making a quarter of that. Of course, if he goes to court, they'll say, oh, well, we had great charm, we had great music at night, and the barman used to sing and everything like that. This could be or not, I don't know. It's very hard to disprove that they weren't getting that money, but this leaves the floodgates open. Now, certainly, it's a recipe for mischief and deceit and everything else. I wouldn't trust a set of accounts a mile away. However, it must be said that in the wind farm accounts, every auditor makes a get-out clause to say that were it not for the parent company supporting this wind farm, it would collapse financially. That's essentially what they say. So that kind of covers them in a way, and nobody reads these things anyway. So what Trump was doing was he was allegedly increasing the value of his hotels, his premises and all that, and saying they were worth more than they were. The court said that one hotel he owns in New York is only worth $18 million. Who can dispute what it's worth? How would you dispute it? Where would you get auctioneers? You get 40 auctioneers, you all get different opinions. You go in to buy something, they'll say it's wonderful, they'll try and jack up the price so they get a greater commission. And you go in to sell something, They'll tell you you'll do all right, and then they'll tell you, I'm afraid that's the highest bid we have. And a lot of the cases you don't know whether there's fraud by them involved or not. That's another day's work. But this is happening all over the world, and this is what they've developed, and it's mentioned in the book called Bean Counters. I'll spell it for you. Beancounters. Bean Counters by Richard Brooks. It's a book on accounting and the well-being of the world and how accountants influence the companies and the governments and all of this. Now, so he makes the point that way back about 25 years ago, don't quote me on the exact date, they changed this thing for fair value adjustments. FAIRVALUE, fair value adjustments. And this means that you can jack up or down a company accounts to suit yourself. And he said this is a destructive phenomenon. This should not be allowed, and it is allowed. So just to tell you the book again, Bean Counters, Beancounters by Richard Brooks. You can get it there online if you want it. It's up to you. Now the point is, he makes the point that the valuation of company assets should be correct and right, and I can tell you they're anything but correct or right. And it's wide open for fraud. In Ireland, the financial regulator doesn't operate at all. I have reported several breaches of the Companies Act in respect of wind farms, and he won't act on it. No regulator works anywhere in the Western world, so that companies will automatically are incentivized to do this, to get loans, to get better value for their property, etc., etc. At the end of the day, it's buyer beware. Trump was no exception. The difference with Trump and others is Trump was the only one the state came after. Trump was the only one where the state and regulators actually took action. So they wanted him to abide by a certain of obsolete principles on adjustments of value, while the rest of the world could do the opposite. And this is the weaponization of the law. Nobody else was prosecuted. And that's what happened there. Now, a lot of companies in New York are thinking twice about it now. They point out now that this judgment means that doing business in New York or investing in New York is highly risky. So you have a level of intervention by the state in respect of Trump, by that New York state, which doesn't apply anywhere else, and it's therefore very risky to go in to do business, because if the principle is applied in the case of Trump, there's nothing stopping some politician or something making a complaint against another company. You could get some bookworm who will examine all the companies the way I did the wind farms and make reports. In the case of my reports, they're ignored, but in the case of the reports of these people, they might not be ignored. So the whole business community of New York State is up in the air. The truckers are refusing to supply groceries and materials to it as a protest. I don't know. It's a shameful judgment. It's the weaponization of the law. So what the left-wing state does, what the deep state does, and the woke crowd is, they allow the law to be ignored by everyone on their side of the aisle. They can prosper and get away. They know they'll get away with blue murder, if metaphorically speaking. And on the other side of the aisle, they can pick and choose somebody who they don't agree with and use the law to get them. And this is the same in the United Kingdom, where Nigel Farage had his bank account cancelled until he kicked up. And it was discovered that hundreds and hundreds of people of similar mind to himself had their bank accounts ended. And only for Rishi Sunak, and it could have been a Labour government in there, could have been a left-wing government, they could have ignored the whole thing, but only for Rishi Sunak actually started an inquiry and realised that this was a step too far, even for Rishi Sunak. It has still been going on. The idea was to cripple Farage financially and to cripple all his supporters. And the proof of that is that two banking officials that was doing this had to resign. So now I hope I've explained what has happened to Trump there. I hope I explained that. It's an effort to financially cripple him and his family, and therefore hinder him going forward to be President of the United States, where he would bring in a whole set of new rules that would destroy the deep state and root out the swamp that he calls Washington of corruption. We have it in the EU, we have it in Ireland, we have it in the United Kingdom, we have it in Canada, and we have it in America. They see nothing wrong with weaponizing the law, and they have all the time appointing their own judges. So even in Ireland, if we're ever to get into a position to change this, we will have to have special courts, similar to the Special Criminal Court, where the judges will be appointed from outside the system and where certain cases can be allocated to that court, because you need not be going to many of the courts in Ireland where you have woke judges. They simply will not enforce the law against those who they perceive to be on their side, and they will rigorously enforce it on those who they believe is on the other side. Folks, I think I've explained that fairly well. Fair value adjustments, the valuation of assets in the balance sheet. If the shop you have is worth 1,000 at the start of the year, it's worth 100,000 at the start of the year. It's worth 200,000 at the end of the year, 100,000, 200,000, and you make no profit at all. Your assets have gone up by 100,000. If the following year the supermarket or the Walmart or whatever it is decide not to go ahead to build their shop and the value of your premises goes down to 100 again, you make zilch, you make zero or nil. And Trump was merely assessing the value of his property. Who knows what any of them would go. The fact that they're connected with him could make them highly valuable. And of course, there's awful envy in New York about Trump's prosperity and all of the rest. Comment underneath. Say what you like. If your comment is deleted, go over and put it on the ACBB thread on Rumble on my site. I'll post the link here under again. Bye bye. Thumbs up or thumbs down if you disagree. Good luck. Thank you.